Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Zenaida Gould, and I'm the Executive Director of the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute. I'm pleased to be joined today by Dr. Rogelio Saenz for a conversation about the Latino electorate in Texas. Dr. Saenz is a sociologist and demographer at the University of Texas at San Antonio, where he is a professor in the Department of Sociology and Demography. He has written extensively in the areas of demography, Latinos, race, inequality, immigration, COVID-19, health disparities, aging, public policy, and social justice. He's the co-author of Latinos in the United States, Diversity and Change, and co-editor of the International Handbook of the Demography of Race and Ethnicity. He received the 2022 Julian Zamora Distinguished Career Award from the American Sociological Association's section on Latino sociology and was inducted as the 2023 Ernest W. Burgess Fellow of the American Academy of Political and Social Sciences. He is a member of the Census Scientific Advisory Committee. Welcome, Dr. Saenz.
Oh, thank you very much for having me here, Dr. Gould.
Yes. Okay. Well, as we all know, the state of Texas has been growing in terms of its population, and in particular, there's been growth in the Latino population in Texas. And so there are, there are impacts when the population grows and when different demographics change percentage-wise and that sort of thing. So we're hoping we can dive into that. So what do we need to know about Latinos in Texas right now?
Well, like you mentioned, I think the change that we've seen, the growth in the Latino population, and that's pretty much what we're seeing as well in the term that is often used is citizens of voting age population, CVAP, which are individuals who are either born in the United States or they've become naturalized citizens and they're 18 and over. And that's really, I think, where you really see the big impact in the Latino community. So that in the last 5 years, for example, the state of Texas increased its CVAP population, again, the citizens of voting age population, by 1.6 million people. That's between 2017 and 2022. And of that 1.6 million people that were added, 1 million of those were Latinos. So you're talking about a big chunk of the new people are Latinos. And you also see with the case of the white population, it was only 55,000 people that were added to the CVAP of the white population. So you can see the massive difference in terms of the potential impact that Latinos will have. And I think one of the big factors there is that I have estimated that there are about 193,000 Latinos who turn age 18 every year. So that if we do the math there and we see that of that growth that has taken place, the large segment of that growth has been among people who turned age 18 in the last few years.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes when people talk about the growth of the Latino population in the United States in general, but also in Texas, sometimes there are assumptions about that growth coming from people immigrating. Where does it really fall? Is it immigrants, or is it natural-born citizens, or people who have naturalized?
Yeah. I had done a policy brief with one of my students, Selene Gomez, that we wrote it for the Texas Latino Policy Center, and one of the questions that I got was from people who had read it was, what percentage of that comes from immigrants and native-borns and so forth? And then I had done the analysis, and it showed about 82% of that growth that took place over the last 2 years was from individuals who were born in the United States. So it's more of the internal, the U.S. born. And there I say in particular among that population, we're talking about individuals who just turned 18 in the last few years, because obviously those people that were already above age 18 and eligible to vote were already there 5 years ago and so forth. So it's this new population that is the large part of that growth.
Okay. And then in the state of Texas, that means that Latinos are the largest ethnic demographic group. Is that correct?
Right. In terms of the state, the Latino population is the largest racial and ethnic group. And if you recall, last year, 2023, demographers had been projecting for a long time that eventually this would happen. And it happened in 2023, when the Latino population now outnumbers the white population. And one of the things that is also apparent in the last few years, that the state of Texas has become a majority CVAP population, so that there are now more people that are non-white that are citizens of voting age population. So I think that we have been projecting these changes that will be taking place. And I think we're beginning to see, obviously, in terms of the politics, in these kind of situations, change slowly over time, particularly when you're talking about demographic kind of changes. But we're beginning to see, I think, kind of projections that were being suggested that were going to be taking place beginning 3-4 decades ago, that we're seeing kind of those big patterns now emerging.
Right. Now, I know it's a little tricky to drill down to this data, but as the Latino population has grown in Texas, how are those Latinos registering to vote or actually participating in elections? Do we know that information?
Yeah, right now, well, we know kind of past information that we know that that Latinos have had lower registration rates compared to other racial and ethnic groups. Latinos have had lower levels of voting and so forth. So those kind of historical kind of trends that we see. What we have been seeing, at least here in San Antonio and here in Texas as well, has been that the people that are voting early, I mean, we're seeing record-breaking numbers and things like that. And I suspect that from that population, a large portion of that are Latinos, and hopefully there's a lot of efforts in our community here in San Antonio, as well as all over the country, that are working extremely hard to increase the registration of Latinos. And I think that there's a lot of optimism that our numbers that are registered and that will turn out to vote are going to be very significant.
Do you have any thoughts on why it has been a struggle to improve those registration rates for Latinos?
Yeah, one of there was a study that was done back during the pandemic. I think it was right after the 2020 election. Dr. Bayi did this, and she had done some focus groups with Latinos in different parts of the state, and it was very revealing what her results were showing. And she talked to people, some of them who had been voting for a long time, and they were coming from families that there was a lot of political engagement. People at the dinner table when they were growing up would talk politics and things like that. And then other people that hadn't had that experience, and oftentimes they saw it as, oh, those are for the white people or things like that, or those politicians, they don't care about me. And so there is that kind of feelings that people expressed, and so that I think, to me, that was kind of a playbook for registering Latinos, and particularly engaging Latinos. And I think that that's going to be extremely important if we're going to turn these 193,000 Latinos who turn age 18, and these are individuals who are already U.S. citizens, either they were born here or they're naturalized citizens. So they would be eligible to vote. We're talking about the power of numbers. There are 193,000, but at the same time, there has been concerns that Texas public schools are expected twice a year to provide an opportunity for these kids to register to vote, and work that has been suggesting that only a very small percentage of schools are actually providing that opportunity. And I think that here there is the opportunity again to put pressure on schools to make sure that they do that, and people who are turning 18 have the opportunity to register, but also the opportunity for our community leaders, community activists, nonprofit organizations, and so forth to start engaging these individuals in terms of how the importance of what the vote is. And we know that Willie Velázquez, that was his big push was su voto es su voz, and so there it is. And for a long time, we know from our history here in Texas, we were excluded from voting, or there were barriers that were put up, like the poll tax and things like that, to keep people from voting. And those struggles of Willie and others in the community have really paid off in terms of providing us that vote. And we really need to take advantage of it, because we see those kind of barriers that are put up against us again to control these numbers. That now we've become the largest race and ethnic population here in the state. 193,000 Latinos turning age 18 every year. And yet we see so many policies that have been implemented over the last couple of decades or so, voter ID and so forth, to make it more difficult for Latinos to vote. And the only way I think that we would be able to kind of exert our power over those policies is to register and to vote and to vote.
One thing that Texas is a bit notorious for is manipulating district maps.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how district map drawing impacts the power of the vote, and in particular how it is impacting how Latinos might be expressing their voices at the ballot.
Yeah. So the data that come out for the redistricting come out from the census every 10 years. So then we've seen, and then the other thing to remember, of course, is the group that is in power is the group that creates the districts and so forth. So Republicans have created those maps. And what you tend to see is that there is particular districts, for example, where there may be the ways that these are created, the districts are created, are in a manner that are going to keep people from their own party being reelected and so forth. And in some cases, you have the targeting of individuals from the other party, from the Democratic Party, in terms of making the district so that it would be not competitive for them and so forth. And one of the ways in which those are done is that you put all Latinos heavily in particular districts, and particularly if there are low registration or low voting kind of situations, which would make Latinos less competitive even in those kind of settings. But you also have, and we see this in the larger cities as well, in the Dallas area, where you bring in a lot of the rural parts of the state as well, that are put in with other parts of the larger cities, that again tends to bring the weight of the Latino vote down in those kind of situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I I guess could you possibly explain how we ended up with this system? I just feel like um, when we think about democracy, we think about everyone's supposed to have an equal voice,
Yeah,
and so how do we get to this place
yeah,
where that's not the case?
yeah. It's of course a long history in terms of this country has always, we have democracy, and in our case we were having demography also. So you have that intersection of demography and democracy, and I think that you've seen around the country, Texas has been a primary leader of this, is efforts to try to make it much more difficult for people of color, including Latinos, African Americans, and others, to vote. And to me, that has been the case, that we have had so much potential political power coming with our numbers. But at the same time, there have been efforts to try to make it more difficult for Latinos to vote. So you see it in that respect, but you also see it in terms of the educational system. We know at the K through 12 public schools, you're not. There's been efforts to not teach about Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, MLK, all these other people who are individuals who struggled, gave their lives in many respects for the opportunities for improvements in our community. Um, and at the same time, Texas has always been a state that has been kind of at the tail end in terms of political engagement and things like that. So you see it, I think, in the larger kind of structure, that there is an effort not to have people be politically engaged or create that opportunity to do so. And I think the policies that we've seen with respect to K through 12 and even higher education, DEI, anti-DEI kind of policies and so forth, that are, I think, efforts to try to keep people from critically thinking about what's going on, as well as try to, oh, now I do need to register to vote and actually vote because I see what's taking place. And I think that those are efforts to keep people from learning what our true situation is, and the continued exploitation that we continue to experience here in our state, as well as in other parts of the country.
That is such a critical connection that you are drawing there between the fact that we've got, what is it, 193,000 new citizens of voting age who are Latino in Texas, and yet those young people, those people who are just turning 18, are coming out of a school system in which they're generally not going to be learning very much about um, either Mexican American history or Mexican American civil rights history, and what civil rights history they are learning is also getting contracted. And on the one hand, I think we need to be really empathetic to our public school teachers who are asked to do all these things that are in many cases, kind of outside of what they were trained to do, and in
Exactly.
some cases,
Yeah.
but the burden that is placed on public school teachers is enormous. I think we need to acknowledge that. And and yet what we see is that what is considered required knowledge that's implemented in our Texas schools, it's just very limited in terms of what it includes for Mexican Americans, and again, just generally civil rights. So if you're coming out of that school system with limited information about how historically Mexican Americans had to struggle to even get the right to vote, had to struggle to ensure that their poll tax was paid, that they had passed whatever other requirements, that they were going to be able to cast that ballot based on their own feelings and not be coerced by somebody else, and not get in trouble at work because you went and you voted for whoever you voted for.
Right.
All of these things that just so many people don't know that history, and so they're not carrying that knowledge with them, which could potentially motivate them to say, you know what, it is my civic duty
Mhm.
to register. It's my civic duty to go and cast a ballot, because of what we had to do in order to just have that right, hold on to that right. So yeah, that's an important connection there. Um, let's see. We have a question from an audience member. I knew
Okay.
somebody was going to ask this. This is the question that a lot of people want to know. Can you help us understand why so many Hispanics in South Texas support former President Trump?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I get it probably
Mhm,
pretty often. Probably in a week, I probably get it 2 or 3 times,
mhm,
and that has been, of course, historically the case was that the South Texas and the border areas as a whole tended to be very much strongly Democrat, and in our last election, we really saw that change, that there was an increase in Republican support for in Republican the Republican vote for Trump, and in Zapata County, Trump actually won there, and there was another border county or two. And why is the reason? And there's a variety of factors. I think one of them has to do with the kinds of jobs that we find along the border and in South Texas as well. Many of these are jobs with Homeland Security, with Border Patrol, and so forth. And I had done a paper in the brown paper series, Sarah, that
mhm,
you put together after the election, and I had done an analysis that was showing, then looking at students and undergraduates who graduated and what their major was. And you see, I think criminal justice was like the top four, was like number four in among college graduates in terms of majors along the border, and it was maybe like eighth or so in the interior of the state. So I think you see some of that the economics that takes place. That is one factor, and I think that the other factor has to do that we've seen a greater degree of diversification of the Latino population, and in particular, I think we also see it along religious lines, and we've seen in the Latino community, not only here in Texas and in the border, but nationwide, that we've seen increasing Latinos and converting to, or in some cases with generations, being born into more evangelical kind of a religions. And I think that that's probably a factor that we see playing out in the Trump support and the Republican support, and along the border, and even in the colonias, you see the little evangelical kind of places of worship, and so forth. So those are two of the primary factors, I think, that are going on. People have also said, well, there's also the so-called macho factors, things like that, and maybe that's going on to a certain extent, but and that probably is playing some role, because we know that there is also a split along gender lines, where you see that Latino men are more likely to be, not that they're more likely to be Republican, but they're more likely to support Republicans compared to Latina women. And so that is another factor, I think, that also plays a role.
mm. And that also, I think, maybe raises some similar trends in the African American community, that we've seen that with the division between African American men and African American women, and where it seems that they're falling in their voting patterns.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and we saw President Obama then trying to rally the troops, and getting people to get the black males to support Vice President Harris.
Yeah. I'm also curious. Again, we know that registration rates have been lower for Latinos over the last couple of elections. But now we've seen this big boom here in Texas in terms of people who not only registered but also early voted, and we don't have numbers yet, I believe, on racial or ethnic breakdown of those. But do you um, do you have any thoughts based on previous elections? Um, how Latinos could impact this coming election?
Mhm. Yeah, I think, and again, those numbers bear it out. We're talking about the new potential voters, 1 million out of 1.6 million. So that we really, I think, have the opportunity to be able to impact the election results.
Yeah.
Again, particularly if we even if we say, okay, well, voting, the registration rates and the voting rates remain the same, the large number of people that are being added, but the greater degree of potential, of course, is if people are registering and are voting. And I think that uh, even though I don't have the data and so forth, and I've been looking forward to see what the numbers look like, I have in my gut feeling that the numbers of people that are registering and that will eventually and or already have turned out to vote are going to be significantly higher than has been in the past.
And have you noticed any trends of particular issues that do get Latinos to the polls?
Um, I think in many respects it has been the economic situation. I think that was
Mhm.
the big thing that was the post election analysis um, back in 2020 was suggesting that when uh, Biden was approaching kind of the Latino community. Uh, they were dealing with issues having to do with immigration. Kind of immigration was at the top, and when there were the surveys that were taken, and particularly after in the Latino community, maybe immigration was number 5 or something like that,
Mhm.
and it was the economy was kind of the major factor that had to do with what people were thinking and their concern. And I think that's probably, I think immigration, I think, is much more, it's even though it was a very important issue then back then, it's even more important right now with the way the border has been portrayed and things like that. But I think the economy is kind of a major thing, and we know that people are so concerned about the inflation that's coming down. I think
Mhm.
substantially, but it's still we know that when the prices for food or go up, uh, oftentimes they don't come down. So those are real problems, and I think that will be a major issue in terms of engaging the Latino community.
Yeah, yeah. So you recently released a paper. You mentioned it earlier in your talk here today, and I just wanted to, if it's okay with you, I'm going to drop a link
Sure.
into the chat so folks can, if they want to read more, they can. But I just did want to ask you about some of these regions where we're really seeing the growth. What I read the paper and West Texas.
Yeah. Mhm.
Could you talk a little bit about West Texas?
Yeah, that's such an interesting region. I think that as a whole, that has been one of the regions I think that has been kind of been neglected. And so you're seeing West Texas, but particularly also the Permian Basin and the Panhandle area, and that's really where we're seeing the next group of states where next group of counties that are becoming majority Latino counties with respect to not only in numbers but also with citizens, voting age, population, and things like that. So that becomes an extremely important part of the state, and efforts to try to engage the population there. Obviously, there would likely be some commonalities with issues with Latinos from other regions, but there are probably issues that impact those particular individuals a lot more dearly than would be the case in other parts of the state.
Right. Yeah. Because in particular, that growth in the Panhandle, I would think that issues that we were just discussing on the border around security are maybe not really front of mind in the Panhandle, and yet economic issues, sure,
Yeah,
still front of mind in the Panhandle.
yeah,
Okay.
these are individuals who a large segment of people that live in these parts of the state are people who have been there generations, people who grew up there. You had a lot of the people from the migration streams from the valley that settled out into the Panhandle region. So you have people who have been there a significant portion of the time, and I think that there's also more people being elected that are Latinos and Latinas in those particular
Yeah.
regions. Yeah.
I do want to ask you about that. So we do have more Latino elected officials now. I mean, San Antonio, I think, is a great example of a city that went from, say, in 1980, when it elected its first Mexican American mayor since the 19th century, to now having a Mexican American majority on city council. And then, at the state and federal level, we have here from the San Antonio region, we have a Latino representation at both state and federal levels. How has the fact that we do have more Latinos in elected office now, has that shaped either in getting people to, like, I want to go vote because I want to vote for that person who represents me, who looks like me in office, and so I don't want to miss this opportunity to cast my ballot? Has that happened? Do we see people motivated to go to the polls because of Latinos on the ballot?
Yeah, I think that is true. That where you see, oh, there's somebody who looks like me, so there's somebody who potentially has my interest in mind, knows who I am, and so forth, and that probably translates to a certain extent into power or political representation. But sometimes what happens, of course, is that people get elected and then they're trying to get reelected, and some of that then, oh, I'm going to also have to put a lot of attention with other parts, my other constituents, and all of that stuff, and all of a sudden, then you have some of the weakening of the concerns of the Latino population, and that is one of the reasons I think that we need to hold these particular Latina people that we elect. We need to hold them accountable, because if they're not going to be representing our interests, then we're going to have to look for other people who are going to be that, perhaps other candidates within the Latino community that would run for office and so forth, but that they would be representing our interests much more than people that we put in office earlier.
Mm-hmm. Something I sometimes think about, because it's something I've only been able to read about because it happened before I was alive, but something that I often think about is the impact and the success of the Viva Kennedy campaign, and then later the LBJ campaign, and how those campaigns mobilized a lot of Latinos who maybe hadn't been super engaged in electoral politics, especially not maybe as excited about a presidential candidate. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about maybe the evolution of how we get Latinos to the polls from, say, those early campaigns like Viva Kennedy to now.
Yeah. So there, I think what you have is, and you had, at least with respect to Kennedy, there was a charisma factor that was very important. There was a Catholic connection as well, and there was great mobilization, I think, in the Latino community. The fact that Jacqueline spoke some Spanish as well. All those factors then created that connection. And then with LBJ, there were also those connections as well. And not as charismatic as Kennedy, but a very powerful person who could twist arms to get things done in Congress and things like that. And then I think we've seen perhaps there was some of that charisma that we're also seeing with Barack Obama also, and I think that Latinos played a role in getting Barack elected, and particularly in states and around the country. And there was hope, I think, and I think that there continues to be that there would be that kind of connection with Kamala Harris as well now, and we've seen a lot of groups, particularly women here in San Antonio, that are the organizations that have been organizing and trying to make sure that people get to the polls. And there's a lot of energy, I think, to a certain extent, particularly among Latinas as well, that here we still haven't elected a woman president in the United States. We see other countries, including Mexico, as well, and there is that potential energy there that women see. Oh, now we could potentially have not only a woman but a woman of color that could be elected.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up the Mexican election, because when Mexico elected their first female president, I thought, oh, for sure, that's going to have some kind of impact here in the U.S. because we're not going to want to be left behind. That we don't want to be the behind Mexico in having this kind of milestone thing. I'm not sure that is true. I think that was just maybe something I imagined that would happen.
Yeah,
But
because the power structure has always been it has been very male. We continue to see that, and the disproportionate representation of women at all levels, from the local level all the way to the Senate to the presidency.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And yet, I do just want to acknowledge that at more like the local level here in Texas, we do have a history of electing Mexican American women to a state office that I think is something that we can kind of be proud of.
Mhm.
Yeah. We
And
just haven't.
I think just like as we were talking earlier, that it has been particularly Latinas who you see that are less likely to be supporting Trump compared to Latino men. And we also have seen, I think that there's data that also show that Latinas are more likely to vote compared to men. Part of that is that there is also the whole thing with if you have a criminal record, for example, that you can't vote, or if you're on parole and so forth. And so we see that that's probably playing in that disparity that takes place. And so that is taking place. And then the other thing is that we also have seen the election of Latinas here in Texas, or who have been running for office, that tend to bring in much more progressive kinds of ideas, and ideas that support the issues of the Latino community, as well as other communities that have been traditionally marginalized from the political process.
Very interesting. Are there any races, but I know we're talking a lot about the presidential race, but are there any other races in this upcoming election in Texas that you're looking at?
Well, of course, the big one, of course, is Cruz, and so we're going to see that race. We know that Beto came close a few years ago, and here we are, and that's going to be the particular election. There are some elections also in the Valley area, where we've seen, as you mentioned, the increase in the Republican Party, and there's people that are running there, so there's going to be those offices as well.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and I know you're a demographer, not a political scientist exactly, but you do get into a lot of political science in your work. Do you have a sense that Texas Latinos feel invested or concerned about that Senate race that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think so. You have, I think Colin has been making a lot of inroads, and I think from the very early on, and I think he's been an exceptional fundraiser as well. So I think that you see that, and I think that you do have the potential then for reaching the Latino community. I don't know the extent to which he has done that, because I don't have that information. As I would say, then I play a political scientist on TV, but not a real one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's certainly going to be interesting as more information comes out. So can you tell us, generally speaking, after the election day? So right now, people are early voting in Texas. Today's actually the last day to early vote. So if you're in
So you
Texas and
haven't
you
voted?
haven't,
Go.
please go. Yes. I suspect that on Tuesday, on election day, the lines are going to be long. So this might be a good day to get it done if you can.
Yeah.
But okay, so can you just explain to us a little bit about the process? So people have been casting early votes. Then election day happens on Tuesday. In theory, everything gets added up. In the last couple of cycles, we have seen that sometimes there's a bit of a delay in getting a final result. But hopefully we'll know. How long does it then take for the demographic information, like the breakdowns of, how did Latinos vote? Like, how long does that take to get to people like you?
Yeah. So we're going to see the results are going to, all the predictions are that it probably is going to take a few days to finally decide, because the polls show that the two are so even, and then so I think the information that comes out will be coming out, that's going to be with regard to the poll results. So a lot of the surveys then poll people as they're coming, as they voted and things like that. So that information has always, I think political scientists have always been, have used that information, but have been critical about it as well, that oftentimes Latinos may be missed, or that the surveys are relatively small and don't include a large segment of the Latino voters. So that has been the traditional kind of situation. And then we also see then the official results then that will be coming out, but those are presented at the county level for the most part. That we'll see all 254 counties and the way the results were. And of course, I think that the places where you see the connection with Latinos would be, of course, the border counties, those that have higher percentages. And in South Texas, that the Latino population is a larger segment of the population, and a vote 53% or whatever the case may be, may more reflect the Latino vote there than in cases where there's a large segment that is white, a segment that is African American, and so forth. And so those, I think, will take a little bit longer in terms of when we would be seeing that information. And then I think that the work of Dr. Bailly, I think again, that's going to be, and I don't know whether she has plans on doing that post election analysis, but that's going to become very important also in terms of what were the things that Latinos were thinking about. And again, like I said, it's been a playbook for those organizing and engaging Latinos.
Right. So for anyone watching and doesn't know Dr. Bailly, we're talking about Dr. Cecilia Bailly. She's been a previous MACRI Talk guest, and she did a study a few years ago on Latino voting. Anyway, you can find more about her on her. She has a website. All right. Wow. Okay. We're coming to the end of our hour. Is there anything else that you have to say about the Texas Latino electorate before we
All I
wrap
can,
up?
all I can say is I strongly encourage people to vote, and this is like we always say, every election we always say this is such an important part. This is such an important. We're at a very important stage in this country, and I think that issues having to do with democracy and the challenges to democracy, and it's extremely important that people get engaged and vote, because we are really at a very crucial period of time in this country. And I think that the position, our own political power in the Latino community, that there have been so many challenges that have been put, barriers that have been put forth to keep us from really realizing our political power and those numbers that we have been waiting for a long time, when we would become the numerical majority in the state of Texas, and that we would see all these 18 people turning age 18, and that's already here. And the only way I think we can transform those numbers into political representation and political power is by voting.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saenz. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I am anticipating to see, how Latinos show up and how they cast their votes. I think it'll be really interesting to see. I also want to invite everyone to join us later this month. We have another virtual talk on November the 20th with Dr. Bernard Fraga, who's at Emory University. And he's going to be looking back at the election with us. He wrote a book a few years ago called The Turnout Gap, which is about the impact of, in particular, Latinos and other minority, generally speaking, people who are eligible to vote but have not voted, and that sort of impact that they could be having if they did vote. So anyway, he's going to come and visit with us and tell us some reflections on this current election, and then also talk about his theory of this turnout gap. So that'll be on November 20th. We hope to see you there. More events are coming down the pipeline. You can always check our website at somosmacri.org to find out about upcoming events. And thank you again, Dr. Saenz. Always great to see you. And maybe one day I'll see you in person.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you very much for the invitation. As always, enjoy always talking with you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you. Okay.